Hello and welcome to Top Secret TV. My name's David Becker. On tonight's show we've got the usual world news roundup with Mark and Carla and Between the Lines, and we also speak with Linda Moulton-Howe. I actually did an interview with her at the recent Melbourne Nexus conference about cattle mutilations. Now Linda's a world-renowned researcher into the UFO and other phenomena, and we spoke about some very strange and bizarre things which I think you'll be interested. But first, Mark and Carla with Between the Lines.
Good evening and welcome to Between the Lines. This evening we've got some interesting stories dominated by UFOs. Now Carla, could you start us off on that track?
I sure can. First up, this article was submitted by Ross Dow of Australia's National 24-Hour UFO Hotline. Glowing UFOs haunt radio towers in Australia. Between Sunday, July 13th and Thursday, July 17th, numerous residents of Gippsland reported brimstone and orange fireballs hovering near the Omega Antenna Array in the Bairnsdale Lakes Entrance districts. On Thursday and Friday nights, July 17th and 18th, people in Shepparton, Victoria reported sighting up to 5 brimstone orange lights holding positions over Radio Australia's transmitter site at Koppanya and then flew off to the east. On Friday, July 18th, 1997 at 11:25 p.m, local ambulance personnel reported seeing bright red and orange lights above the Radio Australia tower at Konyapna. Radio Australia staff said they didn't think the lights were associated with their 600 kilowatt transmitter. But you do wonder about that one, don't you?
You do.
There's been plenty of reports of UFOs buzzing these big transmitter towers, power stations.
Probably one of the most highly seen sighting of a UFO is over a power line or a water tower, I think.
Well, here's another UFO report. Ufologists and reporters head for Brazil. On July 1st, a reputed UFO crash in Brazil has drawn ufologists, reporters and TV news crews from all over Brazil. The crash occurred near Nova Brasilandia, a town that is 260 kilometres northeast of the city Cuiabá. Mr. Nito, president of the Brazilian UFO Study Group, the AMPUP, said that the residents of Nova Brasilandia saw an enormous ball of fire that illuminated the region, leading them to suspect that the UFO crashed at some point in the rural area of the country. Mr. Nito said the crash happened around 8 p.m. A huge ball of fire passed over the houses and went towards the mountains. After 2 to 4 seconds, they heard an ear-splitting din like an explosion. The sound was heard in a radius of 160 kilometres, and due to the impact, the land shook. Soon after that, a gleam of light appeared and it lasted for about 1 minute. Mr. Nito said investigators from the Brazilian UFO Study Group believe the object crashed in Serra Azul, perhaps 100 kilometres north from Nova Brasilandia. But other news reports claim that a UFO crashed on a ranch 70 kilometres from Nova Brasilandia. A man named Heleno claimed to have been within 200 metres of the impact crater. He says the stuff is the size of a van, the colour is silvery, and that part of it is above the ground and the rest is buried. At the farm called Bella Vista, reports from the newspaper Correio de Mato Grosso interviewed Gilberto Braga 8 days after the crash. The man confirmed he saw the object, but has suddenly changed his mind, and now he denies ever seeing it. However, Mr. Nito says that in an interview with Gazeta TV, Mr. Braga appeared almost crying, wanting to say something more. You wonder what happened there.
What was it he wanted to say?
What did he want to say, and why did he look like he was under pressure?
2 articles which relate to crashed UFOs, or I suppose UFOs, and if you look at how much the Roswell incident gets given in the media, I wonder if these will actually come up over and over again.
Yeah, that's true. It does sound very much like the Roswell thing.
Well, I suppose, what does a crashed UFO look like?
True.
Well, I don't know. But on to the next one. Ancient underwater ruins have been discovered. The ruins of temples dated at 12,000 years old have been found near Bimini in the Bahamas. Preliminary analysis has revealed that the original structures, although smaller in size than the Great Pyramid of Giza, appear to have been more advanced. Casing stones have been measured which are of the same unique angle of those at the Great Pyramid. Analysis of these enigmatic ancient temples, built near Bimini over 12,000 years ago, has only just begun. Although many maps of the heavenly realm adorn various walls of these mysterious Bimini temples, there is an almost complete lack of other markings. Of the limited glyphs and rock markings that do exist, several match those found in the famous Altamira cave in Spain, which contains the well-known bison painting. In addition, there are exact orbital plots of these planets and what seems to have been intricate star shafts, metal-coated walls and intermingled stones of various colours. Other characteristics closely match features at megalithic sites in Peru, the Yucatan Island and Scandinavia. The stones are already drawing attention, and an international aggressive research and analysis project has been put underway. Mr. Duval was asked how the discovery of these ancient ruins fits closely to Edgar Cayce's prediction of the discovery of Atlantis. His response was, the discovery fits right with his predictions. Now, we are not saying it is Atlantis, but it is sure strange how these findings not only match Cayce's predictions, but Plato's writings as well, even to the metal-coated walls.
Put us to rest.
Definitely.
Find Atlantis, tell us where it is and put us to rest.
It'd end a lot of myths and so forth,
wouldn't it? I mean, there's positions all over the world as to where it would have been. Maybe it was the whole world, huh?
Well, maybe we can have an update on that one.
Yeah.
Just before we go, I'd just like to mention that the Melbourne Nexus Association is meeting every 2 weeks on a Wednesday night. They have guest speakers and group discussions. That's just a few of the things that they get up to there. But if you would like some information on that, please write to 8 John Street, Sandringham, 3191. That's 8 John Street, Sandringham, 3191. Well, that's all for Between the Lines tonight, and it's good night from me.
And good night from me too.
G'day Linda, how you going?
Fine.
That's good. Let's just start with your research into cattle mutilations. You put together an Emmy Award-winning documentary video called A Strange Harvest, which examined this worldwide phenomena of cattle mutilations. Can you tell us more about this remarkable subject?
Well, I did my graduate work at Stanford University in communications, and my whole emphasis was science, medicine, and the environment, and that's where I segued from the university into television, in news and documentaries. And in the fall of '79, there were reports throughout the United States, Canada, and other parts of the world of these strange, unusual animal deaths, in which an ear is missing, eye was missing with a circle of flesh around the eye. There would be excision of, like, right through the nose, through the lips, through the jaw, and everything on one half side of the face would be removed down to clean bone, even on animals that were warm to touch, just a few hours dead. The tongue would be removed in a vertical cut deep within the throat, sometimes taking the trachea and the larynx surgically on the examination of veterinarians confirming that there had been surgical excision. In the male and the female of the animal, there would be a removal of the sexual organs, usually in a high, deep oval or circle, meaning that the abdomen muscles were still there. And in probably the majority of the cases, the rectal and or vaginal tissue would be removed in the back. All of these excisions were dry, no blood, and the phenomena itself, as I got into it, I learned, went all the way back into the 1960s. And that the same pattern of events had happened in the 60s. I just became aware of it in the end of the '79 to 1980, because this phenomena goes in cycles around the world for whatever reason. And in the beginning, in the 60s, and continuing to the current day, exactly the same kinds of excisions are reported in cattle, in horses, in all domestic animals, wild game, deer, elk, rabbits.
Are the techniques used equivalent to what we could do today? Do we have the technology like laser scalpels or whatever to do that kind of stuff?
Well, I became interested in the bloodlessness of the excisions, and because I come from doing a lot of medical programming, the first thing I did was go to pathologists and medical people and ask if we could study these excisions. And one of the things that we have learned is that in some, but not all, of the animals, when the tissue is looked at under a microscope, they can verify that it's been cut with high heat. And the problem is, the first thought is a laser. But if lasers cut human tissue or animal tissue, it doesn't really matter, tissue is tissue, it will leave a carbon residue.
Like cauterizing the wound.
Yeah. And in all of the cases that we've studied in which we found this evidence of high heat, there's no carbon. So this raises the question, what is the cutting instrument? Some people have suggested that sound waves might be responsible, and there are brand new scalpels now that are being experimented with that are audio. And they seal as they cut. And one of the things that we need to establish is whether or not one of these new audio scalpels could remove the entire udder of a cow without any fluid or blood and have the same microscopic finding. And that's a piece of research that somebody needs to do.
Have your researchers led you to suspect any group or single group of people is responsible for these mutilations?
Well, there's another area of hard physical research that we've done that raises more interesting questions about if a technology is involved, whose technology and why. And that is, in the grass, around or underneath the animals, we have studied it from a biophysical point of view, and we have found that in the areas of the animal that there have been changes in the mitochondria in the cells that are responsible for the metabolism of the cells that could only have changed in the presence of something like microwave energy combined with something like a plasma vortex, a very intense energy. And it's pointing the way towards some sort of a technology, but we don't understand whose technology or why.
Just moving to Australia, do you know of any cattle mutilation incidents that have occurred here?
Oh, yeah. Australia had many reports of these same kinds of unusual animal deaths, especially reported here in the 1970s. I have many newspaper reports. It was exactly the same kinds of excisions. And most recently, in being in Australia for the first time, I've had people come up to me and say, they know about the neighbor who lives in someplace north of Brisbane who has had a mutilated goat or a mutilated cow and the same excisions as they've seen in my documentaries and my books. So my suggestion would be that in Australia there probably have been many unusual animal deaths that fall into this bloodless, trackless, strange category, but it's a country with a small population, and very few people are actually reporting anything to authorities.
With your knowledge of the way this moves in cycles, are you able to predict when these mutilations will occur, just like even in rough terms?
In my own personal files, my own personal experience, from 1979, when I first began investigating, to 1997, there's not been a single year where there have not been animal mutilations somewhere in the world. The cycle is, if it was in New Mexico in 93, it may not be intensely in New Mexico again until 97. But in between, between 93 and 97, it might be intense in Alabama or a province in Canada. There's a cycle to it, but it's not that they're not happening somewhere on the world, it seems to me.
So it just shifts location, the intensity of it.
There's a cycle somehow, geographically.
Okay, if we can just move on to the next subject, which has only come to the public's attention a couple of years ago, which is a strange creature called the chupacabra, which was first reported in Puerto Rico almost 2 years ago. According to eyewitnesses, the creature is nothing like any animal known to man. Is this essentially correct, and can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, I can speak only from an investigative journalism point of view, which is the phenomena was first reported out of Puerto Rico in March of 1995, but it actually had been reported in the nation of Mexico and down into Central America prior to that. And while these strange attacks leaving puncture marks were going on in Puerto Rico, they also had been going on and continued to go on in Central America and Mexico. And the general description, at least the drawings that I've received from people, is of something that looks a little like a primate. I think of it as a sort of primate, but standing up on 2 feet with this strange sort of either feathers or spikes or something coming out of the back, with large eyes, slanted eyes, and hands that were invariably described as sort of hanging like this with 3 fingers only, not 4 or 5. Now, adding to the confusion is there were cases where, for example, a dog, a pit bull, was attacked by something that punctured 2 holes in the side of the neck and left the dog alive, and I saw the dog and saw photos of these holes in its neck. But the dog was one of 5 dogs in a completely chain-linked fenced yard that had barbed wire at the top to keep any burglars or robbers out, which you have to do in the island of Puerto Rico. So that means that you have these very vicious dogs inside a completely chained and barbed wire enclosure. And as the owner said, there is no other explanation for how anything got in there except that it flew in and flew out. Well, there have been eyewitnesses to very strange creatures that have flown out of trees, seem to have some sort of wing, attacked an animal, and left holes.
Do they take blood?
Well, the assumption is that blood is sucked in these holes. But again, the holes are not bleeding holes. I've seen videotape of goats that had a hole punctured right in the center of the forehead through the bone, and it's alive and it's breathing with the owner, and there's no blood. So that I talked with a veterinarian that said that he had examined animals that appeared that they also had been cauterized, like the animal mutilations, but the difference is it isn't an ear and eye being taken, it's holes going into those bodies in the chupacabra attacks. And it all ended in June of 1996.
It's all actually stopped?
There isn't, to me, I don't know of any case that's been corroborated since June of 1996. It just came to a screeching halt after 3 people in Mexico had been attacked.
Right. Just as a last question on that subject, there's a number of military animal research laboratories in Puerto Rico. Do you think the US government is experimenting with some sort of hybrid animal or something for a military purpose, and that could explain it?
People always speculate about what could be behind any of these unusual phenomena, and there have been a whole host of speculations about what the chupacabras might have been, including somebody or some government's experimentation. But I don't know anybody who has any hard proof of any data about any of these speculations.
Okay, another area of research that you've done a lot with is crop circles. Can you tell us about your work there?
It's really important for people to understand that there has been hard scientific physical investigations of the crop circles, the plants inside the formations, and comparing them to plants outside, and that the findings are showing that there are fundamental biochemical and biophysical changes. Let's say it's wheat plants, and if you find the wheat down on the ground in a crop circle, and you find that there's no creases, no bends, and yet it's flat to the ground, when that same stalk is taken into a laboratory and it is examined at a lot of levels, the growth nodes, the seeds, the tissue that surrounds the seeds, biophysicists keep finding that there are not only fundamental changes at the cell level, but in the growth nodes of any kind of a cereal crop that we've studied. There will be what are called growth node or reorientation. Normally plants will grow up to the sun. We find that you'll come and here's the ground and here's the wheat growing, and then after formation at growth nodes it'll be reoriented off.
Like some sort of magnotropic sort of thing?
No. What they've analyzed is that the growth node, which is sort of like a bead, there are usually 4 of them on a wheat stalk, the cell water was heated up. The cell tissue of the plant itself did this. It started to
microwaves
like this. The energy is removed, and the plant, all of the plants, are now reoriented. When you come down close to the ground, there's thicker cells, and in these growth nodes we find what are called expulsion cavities, literally holes, and they are darkened. And the biophysicists who have studied it say that the water has heated up so rapidly, it had no place to go, and it literally explodes out of those growth nodes. And what's interesting is, many others, we have gone like a half a mile from where there's a formation. We've been looking for the reoriented, the node expulsions, and you can never find them in any of the wheat crop that is outside of the formations. There definitely have been people who have made formations. They have made formations in hoax contests. They have made formations for the fun of it. And when we have gotten the plants from known, man-made, created formations, none of these reorientations, none of the node expulsions are there.
So with the ones that are obviously not created by hoaxes, what theory does it lead you to suggest might be true?
The question that all of us are asking is who or what are making these crop circles?
And why?
There's no hard evidence that links UFOs. There's no hard evidence that links UFOs. There are a lot of circumstantial pieces of information that link lights and beams of light and odd things in the sky to where the crop circles have occurred. So all of us are still struggling hard to understand who or what could be making them, but there's not a question that some of them have not been hoaxed and a technology has been applied.
And just as a finishing off question, can you tell us about some of the books you've written?
The first book was An Alien Harvest, came out in 1989, and it was my best effort at the time to show with color photographs the trackless and bloodless nature of these animals that I felt that the mainstream media was basically, in terms of network television, that they were dismissing, even though I had done a film that won an Emmy and had a lot of public exposure. The issue of what is unusual about these animals that's different from predator and disease has always been controversial, and so An Alien Harvest was an effort to synthesize hard data, including veterinarian reports, that there was no confusion about them being distinctly unusual and not predator and not disease. The next book was Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 1, that was Facts and Eyewitnesses. And there I went into, since my particular emphasis is hard physical data and research into hard physical data, and so I was looking at crop circles, physical interaction with plants, update on animal mutilations 1989 to 1994, and then the human abduction syndrome and comments made by people in the human abduction syndrome about both the crop circles and the animal mutilations.
All right, thank you very much, Linda Moulton Howe. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's show. That's all we have time for this week, so we'll see you next week. Good night.
Top Secret TV.